My name is Jim White, and welcome to People in Action. Because we didn't have time to cover all the information in our last show, we have asked Mr. Stephen Tyson, Assistant Professor of Humanities and Fine Arts at the University of Johnstown, to come back to continue our discussion on his trip to Africa, and in particular to Nigeria. When we return, we will continue our discussion with Mr. Stephen Tyson. My guest is Mr. Stephen Tyson, Assistant Professor of Humanities and Fine Arts at the University of Pittsburgh-Johnstown. Welcome back to the show again, Stephen.
Thank you very much.
I know last week by the way, let me clean this up first. For those of you who did not see the show last week, Mr. Tyson had an opportunity to visit Africa, and in particular Nigeria. And on last week's show, we discussed the arts. He had a lot of artifacts, a lot more than he has now. But there were a lot of areas we did not discuss. And we're going to try to cover some of those areas in this show. Again, welcome to People in Action.
Thank you.
I think last week we spent a lot of time on the art and on the artifacts. We did not, excuse my voice, we really did not get into Nigeria as it relates to, say, jobs. What kind of jobs and industry did you find in Nigeria?
Okay, in Nigeria there were a variety of different kinds of jobs. There are government jobs, civil servants. There are some jobs in education. One of the strong areas that they're trying to emphasize right now is developing the job skills for technology and agriculture. All right, that is one of the main areas of development that is being emphasized by the government, primarily because the oil market dropped in the late 70s, early 80s. And so the emphasis is now shifting toward the natural resources that exist in the country. And so through education, through formal education, there's a great deal of emphasis on trying to develop people with the skills to develop the technologies that are needed in order to take the country into the future through this particular area, agriculture.
Did you get an opportunity, as jobs and education go hand in hand, the educational structure in Nigeria, how different is it from what we know as how we take our kids through elementary, high school, and then on to college?
Okay, well, there are different kinds of education. There's informal education and there's formal education. The informal education is more of the traditional education. In that circumstance, you would have the child being taught the various morals, the moral values, the structure as that person relates to their family and to their larger community. Formal education deals primarily on the national level in terms of how does one become a productive and contributing citizen to the country as a whole, how to develop that young person's skills to have them get into the market that will contribute to the well-being of the society at large. As I said, one of those areas is primarily agriculture, as well as high technology, but agriculture is where they're really trying to develop it at this time.
How developed is Africa, Nigeria in particular, in the technological world?
Well, it varies. Different parts of Africa, you find different levels of quote-unquote advancement in terms of modern technology. One of the key areas in Nigeria is to try to connect the different regions, the rural regions with the urban centers, so that people are connected together in a way that will allow ideas to flow, access to information technology to become more accessible to people and to benefit people by and large throughout the entire country. So in certain areas of Nigeria, you'll find that technology as we know it in terms of the active use of cars, the use of other modes of transportation are not as apparent as they would be in the cities, the major urban centers. For those of the viewers who did not hear our discussion last week, to give you an idea of the kind of technology or civilization that we would find in the Western sense in Nigeria. If you take a city like Lagos, for example, where they have tall skyscrapers and they have the traffic jams, you could find yourself in the middle of that particular city and feel as though you were in any major city in the United States, for example. As you get out into the rural areas, of course, that changes, as it does also in the United States too, where you have areas in the Appalachian Mountains, for example, or out in the West, where the visible manifestations of technology are not as apparent. So you have something parallel to that also in Nigeria. One of the emphasis that the country is focusing on is trying to develop the infrastructure in the country, trying to develop not only the technology, but the transportation modes to connect people together. And that's one of the things that's going to help.
What about the import-export relationships? How much does Africa import? What kinds of things do they import?
Well, Africa, of course, imports a variety of different materials. Speaking about Nigeria, of course, many Western materials are imported into the country, much more so when there was a great boom in the oil industry, akin to the gold rush in the United States, for example, where with the new acquired wealth there came a desire and a taste for many of the Western materials that existed. You find less of an emphasis on that now. So in the country, I would say that there is a taste for Western items, but there's less of the money and the wherewithal to purchase those things. So people are beginning to develop more of their own industries, much of their own indigenous products. And one of the things, just to illustrate the kind of not just assertiveness, but the kind of business-like mentality that exists in the country. People find a way to create jobs for themselves. They find a way to develop their skills in a variety of different ways. For example, I remember traveling in the North, and you would find sometimes people who could not walk. And you would find that people would take parts of bicycles, parts of shopping carts, and other items, and take pieces and weld them together and construct three-wheel motor vehicles for those people who could not walk. And that was a job in an industry of its own. There was another young man in an airport. Well, there were several young men, and they were walking around. I kept hearing this clicking sound. I said, "What is that?" And I followed this young man around and with that clicking sound, and all of a sudden, I noticed that he would stop in front of a person, kneel down, unfold a rag, take out a little container that had a liquid in it, and then begin to put that on the man's fingers and begin to manicure that individual, and that would be for like 50 cents. Everybody is very industrious, working at something, creating jobs on one level or another in a society where the economy is in recession. And so people are very business-like. There's a great deal of entrepreneurship in terms of developing opportunities.
And when I say import, let's look at the importation of education. A lot of African students, and I don't know how many are from Nigeria, but a lot of African students come into this country. And then they take what they've learned back to the old country. How much, what level of that is going on? Did you get an indication of that?
Well, that has been slightly diminished as the wherewithal to finance students traveling abroad was very much an important factor in the 70s. It has waned somewhat because of the drop in the oil market. The country doesn't have the money to pay for that. And so there's less of that, but at the same time, many of the students are coming back to their country and trying to bring the knowledge that they learned in America to develop the technology and the land and the agriculture that exists in Nigeria.
Are there African universities?
Yes, there are.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, there are 30 universities. All right, 24 of those are federal, and there are 6 of those that are state. So you do have universities there throughout the country.
Okay.
And there are 21 states in the country.
Okay, when we come back, I want to talk about something that everybody likes, and that's money. What kind of money do they use in Africa? When we come back, we'll be right back in just a moment. My guest is Mr. Stephen Tyson. The topic is Africa, and in particular Nigeria. Stephen, let's talk about money. What kinds of currency does Nigeria have?
Okay, Nigeria has the Naira, N-A-I-R-A. The Naira would be, well, you have the Naira, that's the currency, and then the coin is the kobo. There's 100 kobo to a Naira. Okay, so
How
like
does
we
that
have a
relate
dollar,
to-
you know, you'd have a penny in that sense.
A naira is basically the same as our dollar,
As our dollar,
and the
yes.
kobo would be like a penny.
Like a, yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Is that used throughout the country? Is that the same kind of currency used throughout Africa?
Yes, well, it's used throughout the country of Nigeria, but it is not currency that's used outside of the
Nigeria.
country. Right. It belongs to Nigeria.
Now, we talk about the number of people who are in Africa. There has to be a real difference in language and culture there. What did you find in that area?
Well, in Africa, you know, there are over 400 million people.
Okay.
In Nigeria, there are about 115 million people. There are 250 different ethnic groups
Within Nigeria?
within Nigeria.
Okay.
Okay, and there are corresponding languages and dialects along with that 250. Now, one of the things that has to be understood is the fact that Nigeria, which was a name that was given by Europeans based on the fact that it is near, follows the Niger River, consists of all of these different ethnic groups, all right, that were not under one banner before colonization began. So as soon as colonization began, you had naturally a degree of tension that arose between different groups that were suddenly forced together. And so from that period of colonization, which essentially politically ended in 1960, you have this effort now taking place for people of different ethnic groups, this multi-ethnic and diverse society, country, to try to keep the important traditions of each of their different ethnic groups, but at the same time come together on common ground on a national level. And that's one of the important challenges that faces Nigeria, as it does with other countries in Africa. Our country and Europe went through periods of time where they had to come together and get a consensus together. We know about the economic community in terms of that's developing in Europe, and which will be formulated by 1992. Well, you also have something in Nigeria where there's an effort to try to bring these diverse populations together so that they share a common interest, and that's beginning to develop. But of course you have factors of religion and other culturally indigenous aspects for each group that tend to create a certain level of tension that hadn't existed to the extent that it does now before colonization.
What kind of government does Nigeria have?
Well, Nigeria has a federal government. The federal government oversees 21 states. There are 21 states in the country of Nigeria. To give you an idea of the size of Nigeria, if you took the states of Texas and Oklahoma and put them together, you would have Nigeria. Okay, that's about 340,000 square miles.
Now the federal government controls all of Nigeria. Are there different governors or counselors in the
Yes.
different regions? How does that?
Yes, there are governors for each state.
Okay.
All right, you have a federal government, you have a president who's in charge of the government, and while you have a national government, you also have community governments, which are run essentially by traditional rulers. You have obas, princes, chiefs, people who oversee the activities of their various communities, which are tied in with the ancestral communities and kingdoms that had existed before colonization. So you have a balance, in a sense, of national and community and traditional rulers that work together within Nigeria.
Nigeria is only one country within the continent of Africa. How does Nigeria relate to the other countries around them?
Okay, well, Nigeria, in terms of power, economic power and potential, is number 3 behind Egypt, and then number 1 is South Africa. In terms of economic power, you have South Africa, Egypt, then Nigeria. And Nigeria has played a role in the past of being a country that supports the efforts of people seeking freedom in the struggles of South Africa. So Nigeria is very important in that sense. But one of the things that is challenging to the cohesiveness of that power, again, goes back to the development of the connections between the different and various ethnic groups that exist. That is something that is going to take time, and it's being worked on and worked out, and one of the ways of doing that is through education. The national government has devised a policy called 6334, an educational policy. 6 years of primary, 3 years of junior secondary, 3 years of senior secondary, and 4 years of higher education. And you have to take a test in order to get into those higher education brackets. At that level, you would find jobs that deal with professions that, as I said before, will help to develop the country either through technology, sciences, and modes like this. Yeah.
How much investment, Western investment, do you see coming in the country from America and from Europe as far as the industry is concerned?
Okay, there was a dip in the investment market for a number of years in the early 80s, and part of that also had to do with the fact that Nigeria, being a member of OPEC, felt the cool breeze of the dip in the oil market during that time. So one of the things that they have done is now align themselves with some of the plans that have been developed through the IMF in order to try to develop a sound economic base by which they can begin to attract more dollars into the country. One of the things they've done is, of course, devalue the naira. When I was there last year, the relationship between the naira, the national currency, and the U.S. dollar was $1 US would be the equivalent of 5 naira. So that is devalued, and part of the reason is to try to attract income into the country. One of the important exports of Nigeria outside of the country, since we talked about imports, one of their main exports is oil. Oil remains the #1 export of Nigeria.
Okay. I want to talk about the role of women in Nigeria. What is the role of a woman as far as we're concerned compared to how we look at it?
Okay, traditionally the role of women has been one of helping out in the home, mother, wife, contributed to religious services. Now, as women are becoming more involved in education and are assuming leadership roles in education and politics, their roles now are also beginning to expand. And women have also been very important in terms of trade and commerce. You know, the role of trade and commerce is a tradition in Nigeria, and women are becoming an important force in that and the development of the country as a whole.
We'll have to take a short break. When we come back, I want to continue this.
Okay.
We'll be right back after this short break. See, when we left, we were talking about women and the role of women in Nigeria. Could you continue that?
Yes, as I was saying, the role of women is becoming increasingly important as the country is building, developing its infrastructure, is developing its educational policies. Women are also beginning to develop and playing more of an important role in the development of the country. So women's role as far as trade and commerce is still very important, but also now in terms of politics and education and policy making, that is also becoming very important too. And the government is realizing the fact that it is important for women to play these kinds of roles. Traditionally, there was the different role that women play. They weren't as outspoken or as involved in these areas, particularly in northern Nigeria, which is primarily Islamic. And women in many circumstances were kept from these kinds of roles. That is slowly beginning to change. As the national interests of the country increase, sometimes it comes into conflict with some of the traditional roles that existed either religiously or just culturally within a particular ethnic group.
What part of the country would you say is most liberal towards women?
Well, that's very difficult to say. I would venture to say that in the South you have more of a autonomous role for women within each society than you would find more so than in the North, where some of the codes are stricter in some ways. But that's a generalization. In particular areas, you'll find some differences. It depends on the ethnic group that you're referring to.
Now most of this is happening within the urban area. I would presume that outside of the urban areas, the women are more in the traditional role of family and housekeeping and that sort.
Well, this tends to be true. The impact is felt first in many of the urban areas. And many of the women who, outside of the urban areas, as men had done traditionally, traveled to the urban centers in order to get the jobs and the opportunities that they had been trained for within the various states that they got their education.
Okay, I know we have about a minute and a half left, and I want to let you explain at least a couple of pieces of the art that you brought with you today. I know you said this one back here relates to women.
Okay, this particular piece to your right is a piece that was done by an artist by the name of Oji Agve Igwe. He is a young artist who is in northern Nigeria right now, and he developed this particular piece that relates to the pride of women. There's a great deal of satisfaction seen by various segments of society for a woman who has achieved motherhood.
Okay.
And so that symbolizes that particular aspect.
This one here?
This particular piece is done by an art instructor by the name of Michael Agwu, and this was done in southern Nigeria. This is the king and his bodyguards, and it's more in the contemporary mode, although based on
a minute left.
traditional aspects.
This is a piece that you didn't bring last week. I will see if we can get a shot.
Okay, this is a neo-traditional Benin work from the lower central area of Nigeria. And you see the inlaid beads and the brass inlay on the top here. And this is a neo-traditional form of art. That's just a beautiful, beautiful piece that I acquired there.
Steve, I want to thank you for coming on. We only have about 10 seconds left. It's been really great, and I know we still haven't finished all the things you could tell, but I appreciate you coming back on with us.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
This is
Pleasure.
Jim White saying thank you for watching, and see you next week.